Hello and welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm starting a new series where I'll be covering the most important news throughout the world within the past 7 days. And in this one, we'll be looking at different things that happened throughout the whole world, but we'll be focusing on the Ukraine war and then subsequently the news related to it. Starting out, we have the first reports coming from History Legends, as he made a new video where he talks about how the US made Abrams saw their first time in combat in the Ukraine war, and that happened in Berdishi, the village of Berdishi. We have not seen actual footage of them fighting, but we have seen now 4 confirmed visuals of Ukrainian Abrams being destroyed in this one village west of Avdiivka. We then move on to the next piece of news, and that is an interview the Pope did over these past 7 days, where he proposed in the interview that the Ukrainians should have the courage to quote-unquote wave the white flag and negotiate for peace instead of continuing the war. This proposal did not sit well with the Polish foreign minister. He talks about how some NATO countries have already sent their troops to Ukraine, and his response to the Pope says, how about, for balance, encouraging Putin to have the courage to withdraw his army from Ukraine? Peace would immediately ensue without the need for negotiation, said the Polish foreign minister on Twitter in response to the Pope's interview. Talking about this sort of statements, there is this clip by DPA Riot where he talks about the possibility of war in Baltics in response to a question on one of his live streams. And in that, he responds and claims that war in Baltics is inevitable in time, as the hardline anti-Russia rhetoric will not go unnoticed and is definitely being noticed by the Russians, and it will eventually have consequences because the Baltics themselves are not any sort of power. They are very weak militarily and small countries. In comparison, Russia is a major country that is one of the strongest powers in the world militarily. For them being this hardline stance and using their rhetoric that they use against the Russians will eventually have consequences. And back to the Ukraine war, we have first confirmed footage, well, not the first selfie with a Russian soldier and a Leopard tank, but this one is claimed to be the first one that is being sent to Russia, because how many Leopards are in Russia? So far, not any. But with this, there could be one. As for the current situation with the lack of aid for Ukraine, there is this article by the Financial Times where they talk about how the Ukrainians are forced to look at Plan B and C. Ukraine's original Plan A, said Pitlaza, had been that fresh US and EU aid would start flowing in January. Hungary held up the EU's 50 billion euros 4-year non-military aid package, which was eventually agreed in mid-February. These delays have meant that Kiev has started looking at Plan B and even at Plan C, Pitlaza said. Pitlaza being the People's Deputy of Ukraine. She did not specify what plans A, B, and C were, but this pretty much means that they are moving on from the lack of US aid and trying to figure out a plan where they can survive without it. And back to the topic of NATO troops in Ukraine, as was stated with the Polish foreign minister stating, some NATO countries have already sent their troops to Ukraine without specifying the magnitude or the roles of these troops or who has sent them. But we are seeing this statement from France according to Politico, this article here. France is building an alliance of countries open to potentially sending Western troops to Ukraine, and in the process deepening its clash with a more cautious Berlin. Germany is disagreeing with sending troops, and so is the British foreign minister. As he stated, British foreign secretary opposes sending NATO troops to Ukraine, even for training missions. So the British want 0 NATO troops in Ukraine. Yet we're seeing that the French are opposing the British and the Germans by stating that they want to create this alliance of the willing. In regards to the unity and the strength of NATO, there's also this article here by The Telegraph, where European nations must be ready if Donald Trump pulls the US out of NATO. Foreign diplomats who are from NATO member countries have told The Telegraph. Diplomats from countries with NATO membership said that European capitals need to do the planning and reconsider current defense capabilities in light of threats issued by the former president. Talking about the US president, there are several comments by the US current president. The first one is a US aid mission being sent to the Gaza Strip. This mission is by the US to set up and build a makeshift dockyard to provide aid to the suffering civilians in Gaza through the making of this dockyard and providing aid through it. This operation started yesterday and is in the process of being sent to build it there. However, at the same time, the US President Joe Biden criticized Netanyahu for not preventing more civilian casualties, but at the same time claims there's no red lines for Israel. Regardless of what happens, the US will support them. And this was a backtrack after he previously said that invading Rafah would be a red line. He then goes back to say there is no red lines, so Rafah is not a red line after all, because the US will support Israelis regardless. Moving back to the Ukraine war, there is this article here by Foreign Affairs saying that the Russian army can break through the front without an increase in military assistance from the West and a change in Kiev's strategy. The position of the armed forces of Ukraine may worsen sharply by the summer. They're stating here that the US aid is necessary for Ukraine to continue fighting, otherwise they risk the Russian army breaking through the Ukrainian defensive lines. But it does also mention Ukraine changing its strategy, which they so far are doing by significantly speeding up the building of defenses. However, it may just be too little, too late. Then we have the final 2 points of the Ukraine war. First off, we have Denis Davidov in his past 3 videos claiming that Russia is losing with 2 sets. And in these series of videos, he claims that Russia is losing, and not just losing, but they're taking heavy losses as well. As for the final Russian-Ukrainian war point, Web Union, the guy right here sitting talking into the microphone, predicts this Russian summer offensive that the Foreign Affairs was talking about. And in this series of videos, namely codename Operation Dnieper River, codename Operation Golden Fish, and codename Operation Poseidon's Fist, Web Union gives his 2 cents as to how a Russian offensive will take place in the summer. Finally, there are 3 additional points to the world news. First one is the Irish Prime Minister proposed a change to quote-unquote outdated language about family and gender roles. And this proposal failed, as in a referendum by the people to whether or not to change this in the Irish constitution failed, as the majority of the people did not want that to happen. With some local news from Denmark, the conservative leader Søren Pape Poulsen died of natural causes at the age of 52 in the middle of a meeting, leaving Danish politicians and family saddened by the sudden death. And finally, in the central parts of Africa, History Legends just released a video talking about how the Democratic Republic of the Congo is preparing for war against Rwanda. In his video, he analyzes the recent developments between several Central African countries of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda, with some border clashes, some rebels, and some potential for a declaration of war between the Democratic Republic of Congo on Rwanda. And that is all for this week's news. Let me know what you think of this series. Should I continue it as on a weekly basis? And if you have any news you want me to cover from throughout the world, so we have no blind spots in the reporting, we need to fill this map out with news from throughout the world. So I'll make a community post where you can write news throughout the week that I can look up and report on for the next week's episode of World News Recap. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.